What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome to The Nerdy Narrative, a channel where I like to talk about all sorts of fun bookish related things in the science fiction, fantasy, horror, and manga genres. In today's episode of Fun, I am going to go over my weekly reading wrap-up, which includes any book mail I've received, what I read, what I'm reading, and what is next on deck. So as far as book mail, I did get a couple of requests to read and review arcs in exchange for an honest review. Both of those I've got on my Kindle. The first one I received is Shelter for the Damned by Mike Thorne. It's a horror novel that I have been seeing mentioned all over my social media. I'm really excited to get to it. The cover is pretty dang cool. This one drops February 26th and it's going to be published by Journalstone, so I'm going to make it a priority to get this one read and hopefully reviewed on the channel before it becomes available for purchase, so you guys can check it out and see what you think. The second arc that I received is a book of horror poetry written by Eric LaRocca called Fang Dandelion. This is one I have been waiting on to get published because I must have a physical copy in my collection. This is my first time reading horror poetry, and what a ride. And actually we can segue into the what I read section of this because that is one of the books that I've actually completed this week. So Eric LaRocca wrote Fang Dandelion last year during the months that he was quarantined due to the pandemic outbreak. A lot of it felt like it was driven by some very dark emotions that Eric might have been experiencing at the time. There are some that I read that I didn't understand. There were some that I read that I liked. There are some I read I didn't like, but there were some I read that I loved. Absolutely loved. I mean, and it's not because I even related to it or the feeling behind it, but just the beauty of the poem and of just the beauty of the story that the poem told. Wow. I've never been big into poetry. I've never owned any books of poetry. I've never sought out poetry. Something I've just really come to enjoy is experiencing other types of literature, and poetry is one of those. I will definitely be working on my written review for Fang Dandelion very soon and getting it up on my Goodreads so you guys can check it out there. Before I read it, I had already planned to purchase it because Eric has become an auto-buy author for me. Even though I received the arc to read and review, I am still going to purchase a physical copy for my collection. So next up in my journey of experiencing all the different types of manga, I have been working on the Oren High School Host Club, which is a buddy read that I'm doing with Una from the Codex Cantina. So this is my first experience with the shoujo type of manga, and at first I wasn't sure I was going to like it, but of course I've only tried this one series out so far. So is it the type of manga or is it the series? I will admit the first volume of Oren High School Host Club didn't have me sold. I was just a little bit put off by the idea of this host club kind of thing. But the second and third, I started getting pulled in by the characters and just getting invested in knowing more about them. So, and then the fourth one, I was kind of like, maybe not. But then the fifth one, we started getting some depth to the characters. But then I was like, okay, now wait a minute. I think I might be starting to get emotionally attached to some of these guys. So I'm definitely going to have to continue the series to see how it's all going to play out. The art is very beautiful. That is probably my favorite thing about Oren High School Host Club is just how beautiful the characters are and the background and just the way the author used different types of patterns in her thought bubbles to convey emotions. I didn't notice that at first until Una pointed it out when we were talking in Discord, but then I started looking for it and noticed that those different patterns really did cause me to understand the emotions and intent behind that character's speech. So yeah, I really like that aspect of the series so far. After that, I finished Gardens of the Moon, which is book 1 in the Malazan series by Steven Erikson. Wow. So I buddy read this with Stephanie from Miss Richards Reads and Angela from Literature Science Alliance, and we all just had the best time reading this book. I'm sure you all have heard many things about this series. I feel like reading it with a couple of good friends that share your taste in books really helps. I know I enjoyed talking about it with them as we went through and just discussing theories and predictions and responses to things that we read about as the story progressed. The most simplistic description I can give to you is you start out with hundreds of loose threads. And as you make your way through the book, the threads just come together. And by the time you reach the end, those threads have been woven into the most beautiful tapestry, a work of art. I was so shocked that this book had an ending. Even if I'd never read the rest of the series, I was satisfied with how this book ended. It could have been a standalone. I'm very excited that it isn't, because I am so curious as to where we're going to go from here. I want to know more about all of these characters, and there are a lot of characters. I don't care how many there are. I enjoyed all of them. I enjoyed the character development that I saw. I can't wait to see more. Oh man, I'm just very excited. I'm very excited to continue my journey through the Molasses series. And so the next book doesn't fall into the what I read or what I am reading. It falls into the I didn't finish because I got tired of it. Yes, I DNF'd Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. It's nothing against the writing style. The writing style is one that I enjoyed. I understand the theme of this book was to explore the alienation of the characters. I was good with that. I enjoyed it. The main character, Rascal, I was completely taken in. But as it progressed, I just got worn out. So the author just brought us to the brink of discovery so many times, brought you right to the edge, and then was like, nah, never mind. We're not going to do that yet. And in the midst of that, we get new characters introduced with hilarious stories of, just with hilarious side stories of their own that were very humorous and amusing, and I loved reading about those, but it just went too long. Maybe if it was just 350 pages of that or so, I would have been fine. No, it just kept going and just kept bringing me to the brink, only to be like, nah, you ain't ready. And I'm sorry, I was ready. I was so ready to have this closed out. So we got what I read and what I DNF'd out of the way. Let's talk about what I'm still reading. And that is City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is book 1 in the Divine Cities trilogy. I had no idea it was part of a trilogy when I read it. This is the Shelf Space Book Club pick for the month of January, which is why I picked it up. I am absolutely enjoying it. It's a fantasy novel that has a lot of mystery to it, which I really enjoy. It's about a world called the Continent. At one point, a certain race of people were the most powerful because of the gods that protected them, the divinities. Well, another race of people ended up killing off the gods, so they took over and became like the ruling power. This story takes place in the aftermath of all of that. I was always a big fan of Greek mythology in school. I love reading about it. So my thoughts were that this would maybe be like an adult version of the Percy Jackson books. That's not quite the case, but I'm still fascinated by it. I've really enjoyed it. I will definitely be getting books 2 and 3 and finishing this out because I just have to know how it ends. I will say in this one, I'm more interested in the plot than the characters. It actually took me over half of the book to even form a connection to just one of the characters and become invested in his story. So we'll just have to see how it goes. Friend Abby, she loved this book so much, she actually has already read books 2 and 3. And she said in book 2, it starts really taking a dark turn and it's more of a horror fantasy. At that point, I'm all in for that. So I hope to be catching up to her so we can talk about it. Abby said that she was planning to film a series review. So if she has that up by the time this goes up, I'll have that linked in the description box down below for you guys. That will take care of everything that I'm currently reading. Let's talk about what I'm going to read next. And what I mean by read next, I mean I'm going to go ahead and start this today. So the first one is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I came in on the tail end of the Cosmere by starting with the Stormlight Archives, which is fine. You can definitely do that. But from what I heard of a lot of my friends that read Rhythm of War, there were so many fun references and connections to the earlier books in the Cosmere that I felt left out. So I decided at that point, before we get our next Stormlight book and I reread those, I want to be able to reread those with the rest of the Cosmere under my belt. That begins with Elantris. So I'm going to get started on this one this afternoon. Due to the really weird reading mood that I found myself in this week, I'm going to read something a little outside the norm for me. I'm going to go ahead and start my journey in the Grishaverse with Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I've never read anything by her, and I decided to start here because we've got that TV series coming out, I want to say in April. I believe this is a YA series. I'm not sure, but it's probably filled with a lot of fantastical romance, fluff, drama. I don't know. I'm going to try it. Why not? Why not? Something else I wanted to do this year is start working my way through the collection of stories written by Clarice Lispector. So for however long it takes me, I want to at least read one of her short stories per week until I make it through this collection. And just to be a little spontaneous with it, I don't want to read them in order they are in the book. So let's just pick one. Where do you start? Alright, so this week's story that I'm going to read by Clarice Lispector is In Search of a Dignity. The thing that I love most about Clarice Lispector short stories is that they are so open and subjective to the reader for interpretation. And the reason why I only want to read one of her stories per week is that you don't stop thinking about her stories when you get to the end. The thought, just my thought process with her work is it lasts for days. I usually will finish the story and have an interpretation in mind for it, but as I think about it over the next few days, that will sometimes change or evolve into something else. And so while that can be frustrating, it's also fun and I think just really keeps my brain exercised. Tune into next week's wrap up to hear about what I think about this particular short story. Alright guys, that will wrap up my book mail, what I read, what I am still reading, and what I plan to read next. Guys, thank you so much for watching and spending some of your precious time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped get your morning off to a good start. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.